Everything looks good. We're good. We're good. Let's get the patch notes back up. And let's actually talk about the patch before being so rudely interrupted by technical difficulties. So this OTA sucked, right? I mean, comparatively, I think this was a good OTA. But that's a low bar, right? I did like some of the... I liked the nerfs, generally speaking, to Agent Venom and Surtur, and I like the buff to Thanos. And I don't have that strong opinions on most of the other stuff. Alright, so if you're just now joining us, all I've talked about so far was the fact that America has a really bad literacy rate problem, and they should probably make these notes a little bit more concise and simple to help the average snapper actually be willing to read it. I like the level of detail they go into on a personal level. I don't think this serves the general player base super well. That's all you've missed. I think Thanos being buffed is definitely carrying this OTA. Anyway, alright. Agent Venom, 244, 253. I mean, it doesn't look as nice on it doesn't look as nice on paper, and Cerebro 4 is off crying in the corner as it does. But yeah, I mean, basically what they said was, hey, we made this card so that we could like make some of these other less played cards better. And instead of this card doing that, it just made a lot of other already good cards better. And so they're changing it from 4 to 3, so there's a bit more trade-off with some of those other cards, and it lowers the power level. And it's like, all right, sure, it makes sense. I don't know, I don't particularly agree with that, making this card need a 2-5 stat line. I think you could have left it at 2-4. 2-4 was already overstatted, but it's 2024 Marvel Snap, baby. We're making better silks. So yeah, I mean, I think they should have just done this. When was the last OTA? 2 weeks ago? I think they should have done this 2 weeks ago instead of the Shadow King thing. 2-3s exist, by the way, yeah. This card in no way deserves a stat buff. I agree. I completely agree. I think that they're throwing the stat buff in to try and soften the blow for all the people who are going to be mad they spent tokens on this card who didn't buy it in the battle pass, right? I think that is the reason they're doing it. Because there are a lot of people who got their asses kicked by this card for a month, and then finally when it's their time to do the ass kicking, it gets nerfed. But yeah, I don't agree with the 2-5 stat line being like 2-4 was already silly, bro. 2-4 was already silly. You could at least, you got away with that a little bit more because it was thematic and it went with the other effect, right? Because it was all 4s. Now it's like you get a 2-5 that makes 3s. Okay? Very weird. Very weird. RIP Cerebro. I don't know why they came to this conclusion. I think they should have left it as a 2-4 or hell, made it a 2-3 like Chad is suggesting. I don't know. Weird. Very weird. Surtur. A lot of people are going to be surprised this actually got changed. I am one of those people. Didn't think they would change this card. Not that the change is super crazy or anything, but it's something. It's going from a 3-5 to a 3-4. This card shouldn't have been a 3-5 at all, ever, to begin with. The bulk of Surtur's initial development, the Scar deck revolving around cards with 10 or more power, wasn't a strong performer. We wanted Surtur to be enough of a boost to push it into competitive limelight and tuned accordingly. However, in the weeks after we finalized the card before release, we saw the deck grow into its own quickly. This sort of thing happens sometimes, and more often than you might realize. It's a core challenge of coordinating fast-moving internal playtest environments alongside OTA balance to forecast dual outcomes. However, in this case, it led to Surtur's play rate exploding outside our tolerance for healthy metagame diversity almost immediately. Making a couple of tweaks to reconcile that and ensure that the Season Pass is fueling a fun deck that's competitive without drowning out the other enjoyable strategies. I mean, I think this is pretty simple to understand, right? The tens deck wasn't ever really a thing, and then it became a thing with Mockingbird, and then they nerfed it, and then it fell off really hard, and then they buffed some other tens like Atuma and Typhoid Mary, and so my assumption is they did not test this card with some of their more updated card designs, or if they did test it with them, they did not test the better versions, but like the Surtur deck builds itself, so I would really hope that's not the case, because it's not a hard deck to build. So like, here's the notable thing about this, right? Is this going to change the output of Surtur a lot? No. No, it is not. The main point in which this is relevant is if Surtur gets hit by 1- Affliction, Scorpion, Cassandra Nova, Hazmat, I don't know, you get the idea. If it gets hit by Typhoid Mary in the Typhoid Mary lane, if it gets -1, it suddenly does not reduce Scar anymore. And that might sound small, but given that's already a really effective way of hurting that deck, I do think that does compound a bit. So it's interesting. I think that, like, there's not really much room to change this card, to be honest. Like, what do you do to change this card otherwise? I have no idea. Because the design goal is very clearly, they want this card to push playing big dudes and get a free Scar. That is very clearly the design goal of this card. So they're not going to like fix that because that's the intention, right? And then the other half of it is Scar is losing a power too. Interestingly, Scar has been a bit scary internally from time to time, but rarely made big waves in the live metagame. However, before Surtur's debut, Scar was far and away the best card in the deck, and it's still a fairly tight race between the two of them. Trimming down a little power here will simply weaken some of the strongest draws. Yeah, I mean, we all like to bitch about +1s and -1s, right? Like, it matters a little bit sometimes, probably more than we remember, but it doesn't feel impactful in the moment because there are a lot of games that aren't coming down to 1 or 2 power, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it's a bummer Scar becomes a 10 power card, because I think he was more interesting as an 11 power card. It gave him, you know, that little in-between identity between She-Hulk and regular Hulk, but that's just more of a flavor thing. Scar did catch a stray, yeah. So, I mean, I'm guessing, I can tell you for a fact, I do not think they would have adjusted 2 cards here, one of which being the Season Pass, if the metrics on this deck weren't incredibly stupid. Like, it's a pretty high bar to get them to nerf a card during the season, and I don't think they really hide that. The only other time this has ever happened was Elsa Bloodstone, and Elsa Bloodstone was real fucked up. That card was real fucked up. Since they nerfed Sable, Bob is getting nerfed soon too, I'm sure. I have a very interesting thing to talk about with that. Feels ad, man. Alright, so... Oh, Sable's the next card. Alright, we'll talk about that. I have to... I'll wait for the ad to go. I really need to... Maybe I should just manage the ads manually, but it never feels like there's a good time for an ad. Which is why I just... I do it automatically, but it's annoying because it comes at they come at times I don't want there to be ads. Fucking Twitch. Anyway, Sable. This was not on my radar. I'll be honest. This was not something I thought they were gonna do. It's unsurprising, but it's not the most surprising, I should say, but I didn't think they were going to do this. Kind of mad about the Black Widow change since they literally killed it. The only reason to play that card is on reveal retriggers. Yes, 100%. 100%. They had to sneak one you know, this card isn't overpowered, but it's unfun, so we're nuking it into the patch, right? To meet their quota for the month of nuking cards that don't deserve it, right? And we'll talk about that more when we get to Widow. But Sable lost a point of power. Over the last couple months, Silver Sable became one of the more dominant one-cost cards in the game. Our target was a good card, but we weren't aiming to supplement as many other one-cost cards as Sable seems to have. The most popular and successful Sable deck has been bounced, so we decided to go in this direction rather than a 1-2 that steals 1. Sable's pointless now. I think it's still a decent bounce card. I think most other decks are going to cut it, though. And that is sad. And what does this tell us? This tells us the design space for 1-drops is incredibly fucking narrow. If we look at 1-drops, look how many 1-drops are more than 2 power. We have Blade, we have Zero, and Hydra Bob. Do any of these gain more? Nico can gain more, and Rocket can gain more, but it's conditional. But like Sunspot can, but not in a way that I count. Same with Kitty, because you're like investing into these cards. Torch, sure. But in terms of cards that you do not need extra investment to gain stats, that's kind of the point. Nebula is another good one, right? But there are not, the point I'm trying to make is there are not many of these cards where you're getting better than a 1-2. It is, it's just not common. And it's why a lot of decks don't run 1-drops, right? 1-drops are one of the weaker slots in the curve. So, they nerfed Sable. And why are they nerfing Sable? The reason they're giving for nerfing Sable was because it's eclipsing all the other 1-drops. But the thing is, it eclipsed all the other 1-drops not because this card was broken, but because all the other 1-drops suck. And now not all of them suck, right? But like they require more investment to actually like make use out of them, right? Like the Hood or Kitty Pryde or Deadpool. Like you're not just getting a good stat for 1 energy or Rocket, but again, conditional. So Sable, Bast, and Bounce. Yeah, you could do that. Or just keep playing what Agent Venom fixes this, right? But what I dislike about this is they're essentially taking what was the budget substitution for Bob in a lot of decks and making it significantly worse while leaving it relatively similar in the deck it was best in. And I don't like when they do that because it feels like it's stifling the potential of the card across a lot of decks and just pigeonholing it into one place. Why is Bob still around? I have a good answer for why Bob is still around. Because no one fucking owns Hydra Bob. And he's not coming back, baby. He's not coming back for at least 2 months. Here, let's talk about Bob's story because it gives some context to what's going on here. So naturally, if you see, well, they got rid of this card because it was a 1-3 that was sometimes a 1-5, and they thought that was too good. Why the fuck is Hydra Bob being left alone, right? Like that's the natural conclusion to make, right? If this card is pushing out all these other 1-drops, why isn't Hydration Robert doing that? What is the difference? This card is bigger, more consistently big. Is it the downside of him moving? No, it's not the downside. It's this card is owned by nobody. So you sent me the stats. Thanks, Blue. Safety ran a Safety's been creating Snap Skynet bot. And he's been plugging all this information in. And so I asked him to pull some information for me. And Blue sent me some too, and we'll look at that too. This is information that is drawn from Untapped, Snap Zone, and Snap Fan together. Hydra Bob and Silver Sable. They had very similar drawn and played win rate. Bob a little bit better, not a whole lot better. Fair bit better on the cube front, but this is what I want to point out here. 11.46% of decks, 0.9% of decks. Like, Sable was 10 times more popular than Bob because people actually owned Silver Sable. A lot of people picked up Silver Sable. People did not pick up Hydra Bob. Now, if you're very tuned into the game and you've been watching, content creators fucking glaze Bob for the past month or two, maybe you picked him up with tokens, but most people don't have this card. Most people do not have this card, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason that they didn't go after Hydra Bob and they did go after Silver Sable. Because when you ask someone, hey, what's the Hydra Bob replacement, the answer was always Silver Sable because it's the next biggest thing. And they didn't like how it was eclipsing one drops, so they nerfed it. And so what does this tell us? This tells us Hydra Bob is going to come back to Spotlights at some point. The card is going to be massively popular, and he's going to get nerfed 1 to 2 weeks later. Clip it. Clip it, save it. That's exactly what is going to happen, and a lot of people are not going to be happy about it. But that is what is going to happen. It's just... We still got Marta, though. Best card ever. So that's just where we're at, right? Sable got the bat because it was the most popular one-drop that could easily splash into a bunch of different decks. Bob does the same thing, arguably better in a lot of decks, but his numbers are not there. So they don't feel a pressure to nerf it because due to his scarcity, he's just not showing up in decks the way Sable did. So because of that, he's not pushing cards out because people don't have him to push those cards out. I knew Bob, I like to joke about how nobody owned Bob, but I did not know it was this bad. Let's look at the stats Blue sent just purely from Untapped, because I do think Untapped has slightly better data just by nature of having more of it. But it's not much different, right? 2%. It's very, very small. And his other stats are quite good. Average keep rate is good. Win rate is good. And the reason nobody bought this fucking card... I saw a comment on Twitter the other day that made me kind of laugh. And I mean, it's 2024, so it's not Twitter if there aren't some stupid-ass fucking comments on there, right? But... this one really got me, and I really hope the person was being ironic, but I don't think they were. They were lamenting about how, oh man, why do these darn content creators keep pulling the rug out from under us? They all told us Hydra Bob was bad and not to buy him, and now Hydra Bob's in every deck. What are they doing here? Are they getting kickbacks from Second Dinner? I'm playing this up a little bit, but that was the idea of the message was how could content creators be so wrong about Hydra Bob? And why are they all saying he's good now and he wasn't before? And there's this little thing that is important in card games called context. And it turns out in a game where they buff and nerf things a lot and add a card every week, the context changes quite a bit. And when Hydra Bob released, I have to see what was in the spotlight with him, but in the context of the game, Hydra Bob was dog shit. Because you might remember, there's this not so little piece of shit ass card called Arshem. This dude exists. And when did Bob come out? Right after Arshem. And Arshem warped the game massively. It was way better than it is now. It had better Loki available to it. It did not have Cassandra Nova as a counter. It had less random cards in the deck. 1-4, and even after he got buffed, 1-5 Bob was not cutting it in the Arshem meta. And that's not really a fault against Hydra Bob. It's a fault against Arshem for warping the game in such a massive way to where people just couldn't play those types of things. They were terrible. They were actually terrible. There's a reason you do not see people playing these things. The other thing is his buff was very last minute, and I mean about as last minute as you can make it. I'm pretty sure they announced this within 2 hours of him leaving Spotlights. I remember because I was away on vacation, and I was chilling on the couch at a friend's house watching like TV or something, and I got the little Discord ping, and I was like, oh, they announced they're buffing Bob, and he leaves Spotlights. I think it was like the day he was leaving Spotlights. They announced like an hour or two before it happened. It was a very small window, and not to mention, you know, if like you're in like a different time zone, you're probably fucking asleep. It was a small window. It was a very small window. And I wasn't gonna buy this card. Let's see. Hydra Bob Spotlight Week Marvel Snap. I wanted to see what he came with. What else was in the Bob Week? Bob Week was Nebula and Galactus. Oh yeah. So Nebula, a lot of people had it from the past. A lot of people had it from like the Christmas bundle. And Galactus is just so old and was so irrelevant. People just didn't want those cards because they already had them or weren't interested in them. And Hydra Bob wasn't pulling his weight in terms of bringing that interest. And he was bad in the context of the game. And then, you know, give it a little bit of time. Arsham eventually gets nerfed. New stuff comes out. The game changes. And then people start to realize, hey, this Hydra Bob card's actually pretty fucking good when, you know, mid-range decks are good again. And if I had $1 for every time someone asked me, what can I replace Hydra Bob with? And my immediate answer was Silver Sable, I could buy many $100 bundles at no cost to myself. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who is telling people that. It's like the closest you're playing Bob because he's the most efficient stats for the cost. The move part is largely irrelevant. Sometimes it helps you, sometimes it doesn't, but you're playing him because he has a large behind. He's got 5 fucking power, dude. Like, he's big. I like big Bobs, and I cannot lie. So, what is going to happen to this card? My prediction, based off what we saw with Sable, is we know this card is not coming back to Spotlights in December or January, off of current data mines. Whenever this comes back, everyone's going to go for it. Its play rate is going to shoot up. They're going to realize, oh, hey, this Hydra Bob card is doing the thing we didn't like Silver Sable doing. And they're going to nerf it 1 to 2 weeks after it makes its reappearance in Spotlight caches. And people are going to be very mad about it. And so, what do you take away from this? Well, if you want to have the new goated 1-drop and know you probably will have a good at least 2 months without anything happening to it. I mean, it's possible something happens to it. I think it's very unlikely, though. Fucking buy Hydra Bob with tokens. Yeah, I mean, they're gonna put him back to 4, right? They could even go further if they want. I don't think they will, but I think they're gonna put him back to 4. No, see, I this card is just not, like, there is a gap between most 1-drops in this card, and Silver Sable is the closest thing to filling the gap, right? And you could be like, well, we've had Martyr and Titania, but these cards, these require significantly more effort in building around, and also can fuck you over much more easily than Bob can fuck you over. Most decks go for synergy when it comes to 1-drops. This is true, but why do they go for synergy when it comes to 1-drops? It's because 1-drops have very unimpactful stats across the board. Bob gets to break the synergy rule because his stats don't stuck. Like, that makes sense, right? Like, most of the 1-drops do not have good numbers. And the way you make them have good numbers is by having synergy with higher cost cards, right? Bob doesn't need that. Bob just has a big fucking number, and he doesn't care what deck you're playing him in. Maybe you're playing Kraven, and you'll get a little benefit from that, or you're playing Miles or whatever, you get a little upside. But there's no cost to putting this in your deck and getting over double the stats of almost every other 1-drop in the game. It's just crazy. Like, this card's actually the stone cold nuts. Like, I was very down on Bob when he first came out. And like many people, I thought the effect could be a very reasonable downside. The more I've played it, the more I just do not see that as being the case. It's very... Sometimes it's an upside even. And it's very easy to manage. And like 5 is so big. Like, look how many 2/5s we have. We have 3 2/5s. I guess 4 if you want to count like Star-Lord. And we're just talking like natural 2/5s, right? Not scalers. Not that there are many that scale, honestly, either. But like, and that's double the cost. And these cards, like, these cards are worse than Hydra Bob. Like, it's just... I think people kind of memory hold Hydra Bob into, like, being bad because he was bad when he came out, and everyone remembers people telling him he's bad, don't buy it. And now he's good, and people are like, what the fuck? And it's like, well, yeah, Bob didn't change, but the game changed quite a bit. A lot of these mid-range strategies are doing significantly better, and Bob is just really fucking good in them. Hell, we just got a new card that is very good with Bob. I've been playing a shit ton of this deck. This card is phenomenal with Hydra Bob. Sometimes you just get a 4/11. That's pretty fucking good, right? Cries and Silk, yeah. Remember when they said 1/4 Martyr couldn't be 5 because it just wouldn't move and win regardless? I do remember that, and that makes Bob extra funny. His OG effect seems like a worse downside in this. What was his OG effect? Hydra Bob Marvel Snap. I don't actually remember that. Let's see. They said 7. Are you sure it wasn't 5? I thought it was 5. I could have sworn it was 5. But maybe it wasn't. I don't remember for sure. Oh, alright, Bob's original effect. After each turn, move to another location if you're losing here. He was a 2/5! Wait, he was a 2/5. It was 7 internal testing, which is where the comment came from. Interesting. That's a wild card to test at 7. So he was a 2/5, and then they made him a 1/4, and then they buffed him at the last second. But yeah, there's a reason. How many of my decks are Hydra Bob decks? A lot of them are. Hydra Bob. No Bob in that one. No Bob in this one, although you can make an argument for Bob over Athena in this deck. Bob here. Bob's good in the Ajax deck. Bob is great in the move deck. He's just good in so many decks, man. Yeah, like he's just he's the best 1-drop in the game, and it feels like he's relatively safe from a nerf until more people get their hands on him, which is just not happening quickly until he re-enters spotlights. It was a 2/6 in testing. You can see it on SnapFan. Let's see, Martyr. Martyr. Yeah, the earliest version we at least saw. It's possible they mentioned a different version in the question, because sometimes they do, but I'm not going to go digging for it. If someone wants to, though, and wants to link it, feel free. I'll look at it. Anyway, yeah, it's like... I think also people compared this card to Martyr, and Martyr did not do well. Was Bob better than Athena? So, in this deck... Or in this deck, it depends. Like, sometimes when you're doing the kitty stuff, the Athena gets really big, and that's nice. But there are also times with this deck where you just want to curve out, and you're not doing 2 cards a turn, and then Bob is just better. So it kind of depends on your draw a bit. They're both, like, fine in this spot, though, is more the But yeah, Bob is goated. How far did we get in the OTA? We're not even that far in it. We're on the 3rd card. Although a lot of these do not merit a lot of discussion, to be honest. We just hit all the ones that are worth talking about so far. So yeah, the Silver Sable, if they're worried, if this card was eclipsing 1-drops, Bob is going to do that more whenever people get him. So use Bob while you can. And we've probably got at least 2 months, if not much longer. It depends on when they decide to bring him back. They can bring him back soon. They can bring him back in a long time. We have no fucking idea. Every month we'll get another, look into the future and see how much closer we are. But be aware of it. If you've been on the fence about Bob, just do it, man. If you want to play the card, just fucking buy it. Buy Bob. I'll even put it in the chat. TLDR. Buy Hydra Bob. What else do we have here? Do I have a coupon? Wouldn't that be nice? So many of these changes do not matter. So many of them do not matter. Is the ad over? I think it's over. I shouldn't have dismissed the pop-up. Okay, I'm gonna assume we're back. Shadow King. Wow, who could have seen this coming? Who could have seen this coming? Shocker. We made this change to Shadow King with the last OTA to ensure any deck could justify including this tech card, given the strength of Agent Venom and with Surtur incoming. That went fine. In fact, Shadow King's actual win rate took a meaningful dip as the play rate grew. You know why they put this line in here? I'm going to tell you why they put this line in here. This is them trying to make it seem like they had a more reasonable position in making this change. This is their, actually moment for all the people who are like, are you fucking brain dead? You're buffing the best tech card in the game. This line is here for all of us. And it's stupid because it doesn't disprove the point. They buffed Shadow King because the average person was apparently not putting 2 and 2 together that Shadow King was an incredibly powerful tech card. Mind you, not powerful enough to fully shut down Agent Venom, but it helped. But it wasn't enough to keep it in check. So it just makes them look dumber to me when now they're saying, well, actually, you see, we buffed it to help counter it, and the win rate actually went down even though we made the card better. And it's because, because you made it easier for people to put it in their decks, and it wasn't good enough. So it didn't do the job you wanted to do. This line really annoys me because it's very disingenuous. To me, this is very disingenuous because when a regular person looks at this, they're going to see this and be like, oh, well, see, Shadow King wasn't actually as good as you guys were saying it was. Maybe it needed that buff. And it's like, no, it fucking didn't. All it's saying is the player base was too stupid to figure out that this card was a really good tech card. They tried to make it easier for them by making it just an on-rate 2-drop with a super strong effect. And then the win rate took a dip because more people were using it. I'm sure some people were using it wrong. It wasn't good enough to counter Agent Venom as a whole. I hate this line so much. I hate this line so much. It's actually just it's like they're trying to backhand you, dude. It's so disingenuous to me. In fact, Shadow King's actual win rate took a meaningful dip as the play rate grew. How curious. Shut the fuck up. Holy shit. This adds nothing of value to put. What is this? What does this add? What does this do other than try and save a little bit of face, right? For all the people who are like, are you guys fucking stupid for buffing this card? Instead of touching the actual problem. It doesn't add anything. Actually, that is the biggest thing that annoyed me about the patch. They're basically insulting the general player base. I mean, yes. They're insulting the general player base while gaslighting the people who were right. Like, holy shit, man. The card had over a 50% play rate and was played in every deck, then the win rate had to drop. Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's not uncommon for when a card goes up in play rate, it goes down in win rate. That's not an uncommon thing, especially when it becomes like the most popular tech card in the game. They're using this as like, oh, this was surprising. And it's like, no, it wasn't. That's how this shit works, man. However, given that the changes we're making above, we're hopeful it's not necessary to maintain Shadow King at an above average rate. Doing so could have a negative impact on some other strategies, thus we're reverting that change today. Yeah, I mean, you could have just not done this and changed Agent Venom last time, but they didn't, so here we are. We gotta see what a world with 2/3 Shadow King looks like, and it looked pretty silly. Yes, I feel exactly the same. Like, what? There's a quote about this, and I'm trying to remember what it is. It's like statistics. You can make a statistic sound like anything you want if you just angle it the right way, and it's very disingenuous and deceitful. It's like you're not being straight there with people. You're not. And I dislike that. Yeah, spin doctoring. Yeah, it's like this is angling it in a way that I think really is just trying to defend themselves from some very valid criticism. It's like they're trying to say that, well, the card actually didn't get that much better even though we buffed it. So, haha, you guys weren't actually right that, you know, it didn't need this buff. And it's like, that's not the reason this happened. So yeah, I swear that's probably the thing that annoyed me the most about this whole patch was this whole fucking line, man. That annoyed me a lot. I find secondary statements make more sense when read through Ralph Wiggum AI-generated voice synth. That's incredible. Black Widow. This is gonna upset some people. Alright, so it's not an on reveal anymore, and now it's an activate, and it got a point of power to compensate. We actually considered this change for Widow when we introduced Activate, as one of the issues we saw with Black Widow when the card was 2 cost was how strong it was to return to hand and replay. While Activate solved the bounce issue, it turned out that 2 cost Black Widow was still stronger than we wanted to cost the effect, and the 3 cost version didn't have a lot of upside at the time. Since then, we've seen a deck coupling Grandmaster and Misery with Black Widow to make a lot of bites become fairly prominent. We don't want that deck to be an ongoing fun risk. Yeah, oh man, God forbid someone have fun. So the Activate change now lets us make a slightly improved Widow on rate. This card is dog shit, to be honest. This card is really bad. If you hated playing against the Widow deck, which I know many people did, you're probably happy about this, and fair enough. I don't like this because I feel like it is just removing an option. Like, the new one is so bad. You have a 2-turn... This is like what they did to fucking Storm, man. They significantly limit the window in which you can play a card that was already kind of limited. So you can play this card on turn 3 or turn 4. Playing it on turn 5 doesn't do anything because you can't activate it at the same turn. I guess it's good for Ronan. Ronan's not gonna run this card, I don't think. I don't think you're gonna play a 3/4 that gives Ronan +2. I think you would rather just play the other cards Ronan already plays. You know what this really sucks for, though, is like Misery, man. This card has gotten shit on so much. We also have Misery to thank for Antivenom becoming a 4/7. I am super convinced about that. This card very clearly did not sell well because they told us, I think, faster than ever that, hey, we're buffing it next OTA. And then the card or the next 4-drop after it, which was Antivenom, they also preemptively buffed in the next OTA. And I think that's because the data must have been really bad for Misery on their sales. And so they're like, we shot way too low with this card. Let's not do that with Antivenom. Husky Misery is legit. What does that look like? I haven't seen that. I know the Jeet one. I'm not familiar with Husky's version. I have a Misery deck that I liked, which is basically Teeb's deck, but I changed a little bit. It was this deck. I still like it. Oh, it's the Electro Blink deck. I know that deck. Yeah, I've seen that. Never saw I'd say this, but Antivenom is good, at least with the Malekith deck. That's good enough for me. Antivenom is a very good card. People were really not sold on him, and I think it's because a lot of people weren't very good at building around it. This card's a house, man. This card did not need to be a 4/7. This card would still be pretty sick as a 4/6. I'm not complaining about it. I'm happy. I like the card. But this card very much got that buff because I think Misery scared them because it underperformed both in power and in sales, I would assume. The reason Antivenom is good, this deck is like a perfect example of it. The reason this card is good is because it's a good body on rate, or, I mean, arguably above rate. I don't know what the average rate is for 4-drops nowadays, honestly. We have such a range. But it's a solid body that lets you cheat. Like, if your deck is built in a way to take advantage of this, it's fucked up. And you can do that as long as you're a deck that is playing a very impactful or multiple very impactful 5 or 6 cost cards. Like, he's been nuts in this deck. Because if you get any of this bottom row of cards here, he's fucking insane. He's absolutely insane. And even when you hit some of the lower stuff, it's still good. And then it also lets you run Luke Cage, which has been relevant in the meta because of Ajax. And just getting to run these two as a 2-card package is incredibly strong. And now Malekith is fitting in very well as another addition to that package. This kind of like mid-range package that where you're cheating out stats and cheating out cards, and it's just very good. Yeah, they fixed this in the OTA, by the way. It made it back to doing base cards only. Here's a hot take. That's bad for, the amount of decks you can build with it. I think it's going to be good for the card stats, though, because I think all the decks I saw that were doing that were worse than the Malekith decks that weren't doing that. Also, for the MTG heads, I can pull this up. Where... Pay no attention to the Glenn Jones has blocked you thing on the screen. But we can still view him now because Twitter's an interesting website. This was pretty funny. Funniest thing about Malekith was we hired multiple Magic designers before anyone pointed out we'd reverse engineered Bloodbraid Elf. Which is really funny because I'm very familiar with this card and it did not come to my mind at all. I'm pretty sure my Storm post got me blocked. I don't know for sure, though. And truthfully, I don't care. It's a free country. If he doesn't want to see what I have to say on Twitter, that's A-okay by me. But yeah, I was very heated about the Storm situation, if you couldn't tell. But yeah, this card was, I mean, it's not super relevant in Magic nowadays, to my knowledge, but it was a power player. I'm shocked he lasted this long. I think I only lasted this long because the algo probably wasn't showing him my tweets. But yeah, this card was really good, and it does kind of the same thing, except it's a much smaller body. Obviously, Magic's a different game, and the context is different. But this card, I was not excited for this card, and I still don't think it's the most exciting card in the world, but it's powerful. It is quite powerful. Because another card, this is like the trinity for Antivenom. You run Antivenom, you run Luke Cage, and you run Shadow King. Shadow King is good in the metagame. He's a good Antivenom hit. He also can give your Antivenom card their power back. So like this is the holy trinity that you just jam into mid-range cores, because normally you wouldn't want a 2-drop. You wouldn't want Shadow King in a deck where you're trying to play a 6-on-6, right? It doesn't work. Like it doesn't work well most of the time. But with this deck, you could get the Shadow King for free off of Antivenom, or you could get it for free at the end of the game, which is when you want to play it anyway, with Malekith. And there are not a whole lot of amazing 2-drops for Malekith to pull, but this deck gets to run like 2 pretty good ones, and also good 3s, and then Bob, because Bob. But yeah, Antivenom's just very, very strong. It's just you have to put him in the right deck. He's not going to be strong in any deck. He does demand some concessions in terms of your other card slots, and he does demand a certain type of deck. But when you're getting a free Blue Marvel or a Claw or an Onslaught or an Ultron, he's absurd. He's actually absurd. And that's even if you don't get the stats. If it's free and you get the stats because you have Cage or Shadow King, it's busted. It's very busted. Do you have to guess what the pull card is, or does the tracker cheat for you? Oh, you can just look at it. You can just click it. Yeah, it just lets you look at it. Speed and Bob replacement. Speed can genuinely be most other 3-drops. You either want... Someone asked me about this the other day, and it was like, you either want another ongoing one, or like Copycat, or Red Guardian, like a tech card. Bob... The truth is, there's not a good Bob replacement. Maybe... I mean, before, usually my answer would be Silver Sable. Not so much anymore. Squirrel Girl gives you another Patriot synergy, I guess. But I'm not really sure about what the best Bob replacement is here, because they just nerfed the one that I normally recommended people. Why do people not use Zemo outside of mill decks? A lot of people don't like unpredictability. And this card is very unpredictable. Wolfsbane? Why are we bringing up Wolfsbane? But yeah, Mobius, hell, I don't even think it's crazy to put in the fucking Punisher Captain America with all these other ongoings. I'm not going to say it's strictly the best, because I don't know that, but unfortunately, Speed is best in slot. Like, Speed is, like, a level above all these other cards for this specific deck. But I think the core of the deck is strong enough to where you don't need it for the deck to find success. But... is it so unpredictable at high level where you see so many of the same deck archetypes? I mean, you do see a lot of the same deck archetypes, but there's still a decent amount of variety. It's just like, there are other 3/5s I'd rather put in my deck than this card most of the time, I think is what it comes down to. Because even though you're seeing the same stuff, Zemo is still kind of unpredictable, because you don't know, have they drawn their cheap cards? Is it going to get you a big thing? Is it going to get you a small thing? They hit Infinite with this. I hit Infinite before this card came out. I used Surtur and then a counter Surtur deck to hit Infinite. I used this deck. This is the deck I used to finish my climb. But the Ultron deck has done very well for me, and I've climbed quite a bit with it in top 100. I would say the Ultron deck. The only other person I saw trying something like this is who I got the idea from, which is Ika, who just got into the creator program. So big congrats to him. I played him in Tio's late night show. It was a good time. Good player, good deck builder. He took a little bit of a different approach. He was doing like Doom instead of Onslaught. He was a bit less heavy on the ongoings, but I liked the idea, and I just dumped in a bunch more ongoings, and it did rather well for me. I've been very impressed with this deck. I wasn't sure if I was going to get this, but I figured I liked the art a decent amount, so I did. But the Rian one's going to replace it. But that's not coming out for until the end of January. Are we convinced that Antivenom is better than Iron Lad now? Yes. I'm not going to say he's better in every single deck you would run Iron Lad in, because, like, I don't know if this card's better in, like, a Tribunal deck or something, but I think this card is significantly better than Iron Lad in the current meta. Significantly better. Think about when is the last time you saw fucking Iron Lad? Like, I love Iron Lad, but this card is not, he's not in his glory days anymore, you know? He's not a bad card or anything, but he's just not super popular anymore. That's going to change, though, when Doom 2099 comes out, baby. Bum, bum, bum. Anyway, back to the patch. Yeah, so I don't particularly like that this change, mainly because the Black Widow deck, it was like mill. It was like, it annoyed you, but it wasn't very good most of the time. Appreciate the follow, by the way. Absolute Cardboard. Stuck at 95 any decks to recommend. Yeah, I would recommend this deck if you ended up picking up Malekith. You can make some tweaks depending on the cards you're missing, but Malekith and Antivenom are important for making this one work. Or you could go with this deck. I liked this deck a lot for climbing, so I finished my climb with. Or you could play Surtur, because Surtur is still very good if you have it. Can I cook a C10 deck? I'm pretty sure we did that a long time ago, actually. So yeah, I don't love this Widow change, because it comes down to a fundamental for me, which is I don't like when they make a change to a card that restricts decks that currently exist, and it doesn't replace that option. Scata, thanks for the follow. And that's exactly what happened here. It's like they removed this deck from the Misery deck. This is like the third or fourth, or I think it's the third card that's gotten nerfed that Misery was using. And it's unfortunate because genuinely, who the fuck wants to play a 3/4 activate Black Widow? I sure don't. I sure do not. I'm surprised they didn't make it a 3/5 because they love sticking 3/5 on everything. But it's just like if you don't want people playing these anti-fun cards, why do you make them? Why do you make anti-fun cards by your own definition if you don't want people to fucking play them? I guess you could say, well, they made Black Widow, you know, in the base set and whatnot, but every time we come back to the OTA, there's another ad. It's all going according to plan. No, Twitch just spams a lot of ads. If anyone knows, well, I guess I can't say it because people are in an ad. But I was going to say, if anyone has a good Twitch ad blocker, hook your boy up, because I used to have a good Twitch ad blocker, and they got very aggressive at fighting them, and it sucks. Because the Twitch ads are so much more intrusive than YouTube ads. Like they're there's so much more annoying in live content compared to video content because no one wants to like go back and rewind the stream, you know. My TAV doesn't not work. Well, all right, the ad should be over now. If anyone has or knows of an ad blocker that works on Twitch, feel free to post it in the chat. Help your fellow chatters as well as me. Or use your Twitch Prime. Hashtag ad. So yeah, I don't like when they make a card a lot worse and they make the decks or cards playing it less relevant and there's nothing new to do with it. Look, I make money off of Twitch ads too. It's not a lot of money, but I hate how intrusive ads are in live content. Destroyer. All right, so this is the part of the patch where we get to a lot of the things that I'm totally fine with them doing that I do not anticipate to make a large impact on the game, but like I don't mind them doing them. Like, is it good to do these things? Sure. Does it have like too much of a meaningful impact on the game? I'm not super convinced. Destroyer, it's getting 2 more power. We misjudged the impact of changing the on reveal previously as it added less strength than expected to the lower series metagame. I believe that. We're aware that this change also made Destroy a bit weaker with Nimrod, but we're seeking to balance the uses of Destroyer in multiple decks and metagames. And higher end competitive play has a number of options on that front. We're going to stick with the changed effect for now and experiment with pumping a little more power to ensure it can rival some of the other 6 costs. Yeah, this is cool. It's fine. Like mentioned, it's probably more for the Series 3 players than most of us, but that's fine. It's still not a bad change. Valentina. I was surprised to see this card on the list. Valentina is now giving -2 power instead of -3. It is kind of funny. When we saw Iron Patriot, I said this is what Valentina looks like if it was printed today and was a season pass card. So it's kind of funny they decided to buff Valentina, but they didn't buff her as much as I think they would if she was like a new card coming out today. Speaking of 6 costs, we're enhancing the one generated by Valentina slightly by reducing how much power gets taken. She's a risky card to play with, but pretty fun for players who enjoy adapting to their circumstance. We like to position those cards as strong enough to be viable. Yeah, Iron Patriot does look really absurd. Yeah, fine. I mean, I'm happy to see it because I just got Valentina, so I like that she is a bit better on average now. I don't think this card really moves the needle in terms of like when or why you're playing this card. Like, the only place I've seen it is in some Ajax lists. That's where I expect it to stay for the time being. Maybe people will mess with it when that card that buffs generated to hand cards comes out, but I don't think this is... this is just here so people can point at it and be like, well, it's Spotlight Week, so it's time to buff one of the Spotlight cards. That's why this card is here. Winter Soldier. This is another one I don't expect to be super impactful, but I'm happy to see because this was one of my favorite early cards. Bucky Barnes is a fun card in the early series metagame, and has some particularly nice variants to boot, including their fancy new Venomized 5,000 token one with a special token. It has struggled to find a home lately in the most competitive Destroy deck strategies. Lately, more like always. So we're adding a bit of extra power to the darker half of the duo to reward successfully destroying Bucky. And also capitalizing on Thunderbolt's hype. Yeah. Winter Soldier to encourage buying the ultimate. Yeah, pretty much. I'm still not pulling for Malekith even though I'm missing Valentina. That's fair. If you don't think those cards, like the decks those cards go in, appeal to you, makes sense to skip. I was happy to get both of them though, but mainly because it's the first time I've gotten 2 cards out of a week, maybe this year. So I have to take those opportunities when they present themselves. But there are a lot of very powerful cards coming up, so I don't blame anyone for holding. Jessica Jones. She now gets +5. I like that we have to talk about the Shang-Chi thing again. Jessica Jones is a straightforward and fun early series card. We don't mind making a bit tougher. Might seem strange to buff another 4-cost card in the 10 power range, but Jessica won't trigger that card because of how these things work. It won't add strength to Scar beyond being a viable alternative to existing cards. To head it off at the pass, the answer is no. Shang-Chi doesn't make having 9 power better than 10. It's true that the win rate difference between 9 and 10 may be smaller than 10 and 11, but it's still an improvement to get the extra power in every case we've measured, yeah. Fundamentally, Marvel Snap is a game about points. Points matter more often than they don't in terms of like having that extra point versus not. It's just me or lag, please not again. Is it fucking up again? Not again, dude. Oh my god. Is it back? Is it back? It's back? OBS just disconnected for a second. It's not like continuous, right? It's not like continuing to lag, hopefully. Dude, I do not know. Maybe, do I have to update my OBS? This is weird, dude. It's been acting a little weird today, and or my computer or something. I don't know. Weird.